the fact we have to even acknowledge it and say, well, we could do, we could promote ours even better. It does seem, I would think, to indicate that at least that lesson that the Ram says is maybe not as well integrated. That's what I would think about that particular question. Again, is it the worst thing in the world? It's lights, it's Hanukkah stuff. He's definitely not trying to promote, the non-Jewish religion. Obviously, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I feel like if you have to play catch up, or if you have to somehow say, well, we could do it even better, or you say, well, we could do our version, it does seem to me, the way I feel, I don't think it's so much of a law thing per se. The way it comes across to me, it does come across like, trying to create equality of the living person to the statue, and that's backwards. That's my thoughts. Again, is it the worst thing in the world? Of course not. But is that the angle that I think we should take? We have so much richness in our own religious life and our customs and our holidays. We don't need to in any way adopt or adapt or replicate or in some way even channel anything else. We have it completely covered in-house. That's what I would think. Again, is this the most pressing matter that our nation has to face? Obviously not. But that's how I would tackle that dilemma, Steve.
Would you? Okay, I think you put it very well. I mean, I'm not sure I agree, but I understand where you're coming from, and it's referenced and cited, and I guess that's a reasonable interpretation. Although I'm curious, is that something? For curiosity, would you consider it a violation of your values to go even see that, since it's so close to you? And
I wouldn't go see it, and I would not take my kids to see it, but I wouldn't look down, and I wouldn't denigrate or view in any way negatively someone who would go see it.
Okay.
It's just not for me, but I wouldn't be happy with a Jew who travels around, some neighborhood to look at the nice, Xmas lights. I would look down at that a little bit.
You wouldn't be happy with me then, Rabbi.
Hell no. Okay. You, I'm always happy with. You have a special place in my heart, Stephen. You know that.
Thank you. That's mutual, but
thank you. I feel like that there's a different level between those two things. It's a very I think it's a very it's a very nice thing to encourage our children and our families to have Jewish pride. So if this we put our little light, our little menorah, electric menorah in the window, and lights another light every night, and as people pass by looking at all that other stuff, they see the light of the world. Yeah. That's it.
We do that too. Barbara has the bulb menorah in our window.
Yeah, so that's it. That's all. That's. I think that's required, but that's enough.
Mm-hmm. Rabbi?
Yes, go ahead.
On a sadder note, my lifelong friend Antoinette Stewart died yesterday.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
She was diagnosed with ALS less than 6 months ago, and she just collapsed in her home.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
If you wouldn't mind dedicating this class to her memory.
Yes, and I always want to mention that Mike's mother, Aurelia Pudlow, also passed away this past week. Oh, so we're going to dedicate our class today in loving memory of both Aurelia, Mike's mom, and your friend. And what's the name again?
Antoinette Stewart.
Antoinette Stewart. So may both of them have their souls elevated in heaven. And it's great to see Mike here. I understand Mike's in Chicago. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Mike made it to Chicago when they're having a historic blizzard. Yes. And he's there. And from what I heard, your mom was a real remarkable woman. And if she raised someone like you, she must have been.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that.
Yes. So, and it's great to have you joining us. And we pray that her soul gets elevated.
Baruch Hashem. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, shall we begin? Everyone's already on mute. I didn't even need to remind you. Almost everyone's on mute. Okay. Okay, let us begin. We got a broad introduction to the subject of Messiah last time. We read the Rambam, both in his commentary to Mishnah and in his Mishnah Torah. And he covered the whole subject, or almost the whole subject, or at least all the subjects that we want to address. And as we mentioned last time, we're not going to subsist with just seeing the big picture. We're going to try to understand the details and the specifics, and as we always try to do it as methodically and as precisely as possible. So let's begin right now. We're going to start today, please God, with the subject of the goal of Messiah, the objective of Messiah. And we saw last time already, we'll see more about this today. The purpose of Messiah, it's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to earn Olam Haba, the world to come. And all the manifold changes and progress and advancements that occur during Messiah and the Messianic era are all there to facilitate a path for Olam Haba. That's the heart of the matter. And today, I want to further address that before we proceed to branch out to all the other ideas that flow from it. We'll start with the why. Why do we have Messiah? Why is this a part of the scheme of the world? It's to get Olam Haba, or to enable Olam Haba. Once we have that clarified, we're going to proceed to the how and the when and the who and all the details that flow outwardly from that core principle. And we hope, with the help of the Almighty, of course, to cover all aspects of Messiah to the best of our abilities. But we start with the primary, and then we proceed to the secondary, tertiary, and ancillary. So what's Messiah all about? What is the purpose of Messiah in the grand scheme of things? What are the changes that transpire? How does it all happen? What is the timeline? Let's address some of these questions. And again, especially in this subject, we're going to emphasize on precision and trying to stay as true as possible to the sources. And I'm going to clearly identify what is a source, what is a citation, what is a speculation, what's an idea found in the Talmud, what's an idea found in the Rambam, etc. And our discussion today is going to focus on two core citations that talk about the essence of Messiah, the objective of Messiah. The first source is another citation from Rambam. So we quoted two citations last time. This is a third citation. And this is found in his treatise on reward and punishment. The Rambam presents as an introduction to the 13 principles a grand, sweeping, authoritative treatise on reward and punishment. And he talks about Olam Haba and resurrection. And he also addresses Messiah. So I want to pull out that source from Rambam's treatise. And the second is a citation from Ramchal, Lutzato. Now, we've seen a lot of Lutzato already, mostly in Derech Hashem, the way of God. This one is not from Derech Hashem, it's from Ma'amar Ha'ikrim, which means like the essay on the fundamentals or on the principles. This is a short work on the principles of our religion and philosophy. And these two citations will deepen our understanding of the objective of Messiah, and it will be a very good framework for us as we try to continue and advance our studies. So our discussion today will be about those two citations, and we're going to end with, I think, is a very powerful observation that helps make the whole subject more relevant to us. A lot of the subjects we've covered have dealt with very esoteric, ethereal ideas, abstract ideas. Messiah, it's in our world. And our world, as we shall see, does seem to give some indications that Messiah is around the corner. And that, I think, is a very interesting observation that we will share after we quote those two sources. So the Rambam in his treatise starts off by talking about Yemos HaMashiach, the days of Messiah. It's a time that the monarchy will be restored to Israel, and the nation will return to the land of Israel. Our people have been an itinerant people wandering. We have reached all the corners of the globe. There's going to be a certain coalescence, a return, an ingathering of the exiles. And we'll have a great king. And that king will be very great. And his kingdom will be very renowned. And his influence will be worldwide. And his influence will exceed the influence of Solomon. And all the nations will make peace with him. And all the lands will subjugate themselves to him. Due to his righteousness and due to the miracles that will happen via him, everyone will yield to King Messiah. And yes, there will be detractors, but those detractors will be destroyed by the Almighty and will be delivered to his hands, the hands of Messiah. So the world's going to unify, and it's going to rally behind this individual, this King of the Jews, King Messiah. Now, what will the world look like? What changes will exist? Says the Rambam, like he said in his other writings on this subject, quotes the Talmud. There won't be any difference. There's no change in the realities and the rules of the world. The only difference is that monarchy will be restored. And yes, there will still be inequality. You'll have rich people and poor people, like you have today, like you've always had. There will be strong people, and there will be feeble people. The world as we know it really seems to continue. But in those days, it will be very easy. It will be very easy for people to find their sustenance. With a small amount of work, that will yield tremendous output. It will be a world with the same rules of nature, but it will be a world of abundance. With very minimal effort, a person will be able to achieve a lot. He quotes the Talmud. The Talmud says, in the future, the land of Israel, the land, will sprout loaves of bread. That doesn't mean that the rules of nature are changing. Loaves of bread do not come out of the ground. But this is a way of saying that food will be so abundant and things will be so readily available that it's as if the land sprouts bread. That's the world of Messiah. And there is tremendous benefit for such a time. The benefit is, says Rambam, that we will have a respite from foreign rulers. We won't have, like we have today, and like we've always had, says Rambam, we won't have forces trying to stop us from doing the mitzvos. And thus, mitzvos and wisdom and knowledge of God will increase, and it will fill the land, and it will cover the land. And there's going to be peace and stability, and wars will subside. And no nation will lift upon another nation a sword. And thus, great perfection will be available. And through this, we will merit Olam Haba. Again, the Rambam brings us back to our North Star, Mashiach, and the wonderful description. It's not a world that the rules of physics and the laws of nature are changing, but it's a much more improved world. It's an elevated world. It's a spiritual world. All the physical needs are taken care of. All the distractions are put away. And through that, we will merit the light of Olam Haba. And then the Rambam tells us about the dynasty of Messiah. Messiah will die. He's going to be a normal human, like all humans live and die. And his son will succeed him. And he will die as well. And his grandson will succeed him. But they will reign very long. Both King Messiah and his son will have a long reign. And in general, Rambam tells us, lifespans will increase. Things are going to improve. Plenty of food, stability, peace, no wars, no worries. Lifespans will increase. And the Rambam again reminds us, why do we covet Messiah? It's not for the grain or to ride horses or to drink wine or to listen to music. All examples that he gives, by the way. Some fools think that Messiah is all about, oh, well, you have a great time. We can ride the horses and drink wine and lots of food and abundance and go to parties. That's why fools anticipate Messiah. The reason why the wise people, the pious people, the prophets, the reason why they yearned and coveted Messiah is because there's going to be a wonderful atmosphere, a wonderful environment for the advancement of our spiritual agenda. The righteous are going to coalesce, and they'll have the just and wise and good leadership of the king, and he'll be very close to God. And our spiritual agenda will be very easy for us to execute upon. All the mitzvahs of Moshe, our master of blessed memory, will to do it with ease. And there will be universal knowledge of God. Young people, old people, everyone. The Torah will be in their hearts. The stone heart that was there previously will be replaced with a heart of flesh. And all this, again, Rambam emphasizes, all this will enable us to get Olam Haba. This is Rambam. He's describing the world of Messiah as a world with perfectly calibrated conditions for achieving Olam Haba. We'll be able to do mitzvos with ease, and we'll be motivated to do it. We'll have a heart of flesh. Torah will be in our heart. And the conditions will be propitious for that. We'll have Jewish hegemony, a great leader to rally us. Wisdom will increase. The monarchy will be restored. We'll be able to do all the mitzvos. We'll come back to the land. There'll be an ingathering. We won't be disparate and scattered. And this incredible King Messiah, will be so great, even greater than Solomon. And he'll have a huge impact on our nation and on the world. And the world at that time will be one of peace and prosperity, material abundance, like bread sprouting from the ground. Everyone's going to make peace with the Jews. Wars will subside. Lifespans will increase, and there will be universal knowledge of God. And again, the objective of Messiah is to position us to be able to pivot to Olam Haba. That is what Messiah is all about. That's the essence. How exactly it works, that's our next subject. How does all this change happen? What is the mechanism through which this all happens? That's for next time. But let's continue by citing a second citation, a splendid short work on the principles of our faith, authored by Ramchal, again, the author of The Way of God. And this is a wonderful little book, Mamar HaIkrim. It's short chapters, each with a synopsis of major ideas of our philosophy. He has a very neat synopsis on Messiah and what it's supposed to achieve. And of course, he does not disagree with Rambam, but he does expand the subject a little bit to really place the idea of Messiah in the context of creation in general, and to understand how exactly it's all going to work out. What are the various puzzle pieces and the timeline? And he tells us the choicest of humanity is Israel. We're the chosen nation. This is the nation that's destined to cleave to God in ultimate, eternal closeness. Now, of course, that sounds like Olam Haba. He's talking about Messiah. And as it will become clear, he's telling us that the way to achieve the way to achieve Olam Haba is via Messiah. So our nation is supposed to cleave to God in Olam Haba. But we can't just cleave to God in Olam Haba. We have to earn it. The degree of closeness that a person is able to earn in Olam Haba is commensurate to the degree of perfection that the person attains. So if you have perfection, you have closeness. If you don't have perfection, you don't have closeness. And therefore, before Olam Haba can be here, we have to have perfection. And if this nation, this Jewish nation, is supposed to, in its entirety, achieve close connection with God in Olam Haba, well, this nation has to achieve total perfection so that we can earn total closeness in Olam Haba. So again, the Ramchal is echoing the words of Rambam. Messiah is going to create this perfection that will result in the highest level of Olam Haba. And then Ramchal adds another point, which Rambam has not addressed yet. He's asking really a question. If you have someone who achieves Olam Haba on their own, they achieve perfection on their own. How come they can't go to Olam Haba? They have to wait. And they wait, of course, we talked about this in the past. In the world of the souls, it's sometimes called Gan Eden, paradise. There has to be closure to this world before there can be Olam Haba. Even though Olam Haba is a single-player game, so to speak, every person earns the amount of closeness that they have earned in their lifetime. That said, the setting for Olam Haba must be a perfected world. Before the individuals can be rewarded for their righteousness in Olam Haba, the whole nation and really the whole world has to achieve a degree of perfection. So Messiah has to come and perfect the Jewish nation and then perfect the whole world. And that will pave the path for the world to transition to Olam Haba and for the individuals to be rewarded in Olam Haba. Only once the collective is perfected, the world is elevated, only then can we transition to the setting where individuals are rewarded to Olam Haba. This is somewhat of a complicated way of saying we need Messiah to perfect the nation, and that will bring about the perfection of the world, and that can facilitate the change to Olam Haba, where the individuals are each rewarded as per their righteousness. Now, we've been around here, we as in humans, for some time. And we've never reached a world or a situation in the world where the world was perfected. We've done a lot of things. We've experimented with a lot of things, but we've never had a world where the entire world is perfected. Right after Adam shows up, right after creation, it was almost entirely perfect. And Adam doesn't sin. The world just was not perfect. And yes, you have the patriarchs and they achieve incredible heights and they spawn the chosen nation. But even amongst the Jewish people, there was never full perfection. The nation always had some lingering influence of maybe idolatry, maybe other sins. We've yet to have a time where there's total perfection. And therefore, there's an imperative to perfect the nation, because only through that can all of creation, the rest of the world, achieve its perfection. And only once the world is perfected can the world be upgraded to Olam Haba. So the Ramchal is giving us the bigger picture here, and the understanding of how Messiah is kind of the end point of creation, at least of this world as it currently is structured. And then he tells us that there's a limited time that's designated for this to happen. The potential time that God designated for this to happen is 6,000 years. We have up to year 6,000 to perfect the nation and perfect the world and complete creation and prepare the grounds for Olam Haba. And then by year 6,000, this world will be renewed, which is a nice way of saying it will be destroyed, which means it will be the equivalent of buried, to be reborn, taking a seed, put it in the ground. You don't see the seed, but eventually it will sprout forth. And that world will be reborn in a different manner, in a way that it needs to be for Olam Haba. But before this 6,000-year deadline, our nation needs to be perfected. That will facilitate the transition of the world to the eternal world. And that, Ramchal tells us, this is promised to happen. This will happen whether we choose to help it happen, whether we resist it, regardless of what we do, this will definitely happen. This is an important point that we'll pick up. We'll have a whole session, I think, on this point. Messiah is guaranteed. It's definitely going to happen. But the nature of how it happens is quite variable, as we shall see. So the world needs to be perfected. The nation needs to be perfected. Only then can the world be transitioned to Olam Haba. And the catalyst for this transformation, says Ramchal, will be a man from the seed of David, who's going to be chosen by God to do this. God's going to select him and help him to succeed. This is Melech HaMashiach, King Messiah. In his time and due to his actions, through him, the nation will be perfected with great perfection. And all of creation will also be perfected. And goodness will increase and evil will be eradicated. And it will be a sublime, utopian time, both physically and spiritually. And he quotes, like the Rambam does, the verse in Ezekiel, the stone heart will transform into a fleshy heart, and the good inclination will be strengthened. And people won't be interested in materiality and physicality. Those things won't excite people so much. Instead, they'll be drawn to Torah and the service of God. And there'll be a virtuous cycle where things will improve. And then people will be drawn to Torah and things will improve even more. There's going to be a cycle here of prosperity and peace, no damage, no loss. And that will inspire people to be even more committed to their spiritual agenda, which will improve things even more until they will arrive at perfection. And once there's perfection, the world can be planted, can be transitioned, can be placed on ice, hibernated for 1,000 years until it is reborn with Olam Haba. In the times of Messiah, there will be foolishness in the world. The hearts will be full of wisdom and the pursuit of the spiritual. And holiness will be upon all flesh. And spiritual greatness will be easily acquired. And it'll be a very wonderful time, a time of great joy and goodness and closeness to the Creator. A time of great and perfect service of God. And through this it'll beget elevation and more elevation and more elevation until a time of total perfection. And once that is achieved, again, it's got to be before the year 6000, then the world can begin its transition to Olam Haba. Now, hitherto, he has spoken primarily about the Jewish people. Now he's going to talk about the nations. What is going to be their standing in the times of Messiah? Well, first he tells us some of the nations will be destroyed. Those that remain, those who are worthy of being saved, will be saved and will remain and will acknowledge the truth and will commit themselves to God and will abandon their deities and subject themselves to Israel. And that will be a point of pride. That will provide glory for them. They'll understand that their ticket to Olam Haba is via connecting and supporting the Jewish people. As we spoke about in the past, the way the Gentiles acquire Olam Haba is riding the coattails of the Jewish people. People universally will recognize that. They'll recognize that their vehicle to the eternal life is the nation of Hashem. And they'll want to pursue that as best as they could. The world will be perfected. There'll be no idolatry. Everything will be elevated. And that will be the fulfillment of the verse. In that day, God will be one, and his name will be one. In this world, we say, Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem is our God. What about the nations? Well, the nations, they have their other gods. Hashem Echad, in the times of Messiah, God will be one. There will be universal recognition and acknowledgement of the Almighty's supremacy. Now, Ramchal doesn't end over there. He does proceed to discuss the resurrection and the rebirth and how that all works out and how that all plays out. And please God, we will cover that when we get to principle 13. But this helps round out our understanding of what Messiah is all about. The Rambam tells us it's a world that's designed to help us achieve Olam Haba, to do mitzvos, to study Torah. We'll have a great leader who's going to rally us, and the conditions will be such that it'll be very conducive to spiritual growth. The wisdom will increase. We'll have this incredible king who will lead us, and he's going to make waves throughout the whole world. And there's going to be peace and prosperity, material abundance. The wars, which are so destructive and distracting, they're going to subside. There's going to be peace. We'll have long lifespans. And we can pursue with full vigor universal knowledge of God, elevation, eradication of evil, and render ourselves worthy of Olam Haba. And the Ramchal gives us some of the context. Our nation will be perfected. The world will be perfected. Before there can be Olam Haba, there has to be perfection in this world. We have to have closure of this world to transition to the next world. We have 6,000 years to do it. Messiah must come before that and do all the work really before that to perfect everyone, perfect the nation, perfect the whole world. And once that's done, the world can begin its transition to Olam Haba. That is the objective of Messiah. Now, I want to share with you an observation that I think makes this whole subject much more real for us. I want to be very careful what I say because the Rambam told us, the Talmud tells us, history tells us, it's not a good idea to make any messianic prognostications. No one knows. What we do know for sure is we're getting close to year 6000. We're not quite there, but we're close, historically within striking distance. But it's also important to realize, Messiah is going to come. Will this be something that happens overnight? A sudden change? Or is it a process that develops gradually over time? Is it gradualism? Is it punctuated equilibrium? This is a really hard question to answer because we have sources that say both answers. Messiah is described as both something that happens in an instant and as a process that evolves and progresses gradually over time. You look at our prayers, you have successive prayers, one talking about the sprouting of David. It's like a process, you plant something in the ground and it just organically happens over time. And we talk about the building of Jerusalem, this idea of active building, where just 1 second there's nothing, and the next second you have something that's built. So which is it? Is it something which happens instantly, overnight, very dramatically, very suddenly? Or is it something that there's a gradual buildup and there's progressive steps towards the ultimate conclusion? It seems to me, and we'll talk more about this, I think, at length sometime in the future. It seems to me that there are different dimensions to the Messiah. There are elements that constitute a gradual buildup, and there's also elements, or maybe an element, to a sudden and instant transformation. Messiah, as we shall see, is described or is compared to birth. If you think about birth, there is a slow buildup, and then there's the sudden birth at the end. You're anticipating the birth because it's been a few months, and you see a little bulge, and then it gets a little bigger, and you could tell that there's something foreboding, or not foreboding, that sounds negative, but there's something impending that's going to happen. But still, the actual change is instantaneous. Now, this is actually an apt parallel because labor is quite painful, I've been reliably told, and it gets progressively harder and more difficult. And when it gets the harshest, when it's totally unbearable, when it seems like someone's about to die a horrific death, suddenly a brand new life, a life that was never seen before, suddenly emerges. This is Messiah. There's this slow build up and then a sudden arrival. The Talmud tells us, the Ramchal quoted it, it's a 6,000 years a world. It's a 6,000 year enterprise, the world. We have 2,000 years of tohu, of desolation, 2,000 years of Torah, and 2,000 years of Messiah. Now, we're gonna please God talk extensively about this Messiah. We're gonna talk, please God, extensively about this Talmud and what happens in the 7th millennium beyond. But there's an epic of history called 2,000 years of Messiah. It's not just an overnight, instant change. As of this recording, Messiah is still something that we are awaiting for. But there is a process that has been undergoing for a long time. That's a messianic process. The concept of progress, the idea of you're building towards a progressively better, more righteous, more just, more elevated, more enlightened, more prosperous, more inclusive future. My grandfather, blessed memory, used to say that this idea, this concept of progress was appropriated from our idea of progress, from Messiah. But the end game, what's the end game of progress? The end game of progress is perfection. And the perfection is going to be achieved after there's an acceleration of the progress with the arrival of Messiah. And the reason why I'm saying this is because we got a lot of descriptions of what Messiah is all about. What are the conditions of Messiah? What's the world like? And if there is a process that takes us step by step gradually towards that endpoint, it is to be expected that as you get closer to Messiah, you see more indications of Messiah as the time grows near. You should start to see the contours of Messiah, the baby bump of Messiah, maybe even some of the birth pains of Messiah before Messiah arrives. You see the shaping of the future reality. And yeah, it's hard to see, details. You don't see the baby yet, but you can expect the baby. Before the baby arrives, so to speak, proverbially, you should expect to see things trending towards Messiah. And some of the prophecies that talk about the world in the Messianic time starting to take shape. And again, without making any predictions and without speaking out of turn, it is very reasonable, in my opinion, to say that the world as we currently are living in, it is a world that does seem to indicate that the Messianic properties are getting in line. It's undeniable today that there are millions of Jews already in the land. Again, that's a phenomenon that we are explicitly told is a component of the Messianic Revolution. The ingathering of the exiles. But in general, we're living in very unprecedented times. And the Rambam tells us, Messiah, well, the rules of the world are the same rules of nature, the same laws of physics, the same hospitable, for the most part, blue planet, the same bodies, driving cars and taking trains, flying airplanes. No miracles that change the world, that change how the world operates. The only difference is the subjugation to foreign rulers. Meaning that, at least on a basic level, there are more interpretations as we shall yet see. We're not going to be forced to kowtow to foreign powers. We're going to have the freedom and the flexibility to do what we want. We're going to be able to study Torah and do mitzvos, of course, to offer sacrifices in the temple, to live in the land most designed to bring us closer to Hashem. And through that, we can become meritorious to earn Olam Haba, which, of course, we must never forget, that is the world of the ultimate reward. The world of Messiah is the same world that we have today, but there are some differences. Increased lifespan, world peace, Jewish sovereignty in the land, prosperity, a surge in the knowledge of God. But yes, there's no fundamental changes to how the world operates. I think you look at the world today, especially if you have a sense of history, we are living in a world that's very different than what our antecedents lived in. It's the same planet, the same rules of nature, but the kind of life that we live, it's very different. In antiquity, go back 500 years, go back even 200 years, it was common for famine, for hunger to exist. That's the rule historically. To be satiated, that's the exception. People used to barely have enough food to feed their families. If you have a good sense of history, you realize that our times are a total outlier. We're living in times of prosperity, of abundance. Our problem is that we have too many calories, not too few. We're living in remarkably peaceful times. Now, of course, you won't realize that by reading the news or watching television. As they say, if it bleeds, it leads. But if you had to say, when was the most peaceful time in all of recorded human history, the answer is actually right now. Now, again, of course, there are still some conflicts, as we know, but we're living in times that are unrivaled in their tranquility and stability. And again, we don't know if it will be permanent, if it will last. But I think it's very noteworthy that many of the indicators, that the most reputable sources on this subject, they tell us this is what Messiah is going to look like. Those indicators many of them seem to be present in our world. And when you study the descriptions of the pre-Messiah, it's hard to avoid the parallels between those descriptions and our times. And again, I'm not a prophet. And I'm not pointing to any individual phenomenon or event and saying, well, this is a harbinger of Messiah. I'm not doing that. But it's, I think, really remarkable that if you simply study the descriptions of our sages, if you were able to resurrect your great grandfather, and you transport them to 2023, and you say, well, live a day with me, get in my car, and we're going to drive to the supermarket. And look how much food there is. Look at the kinds of lives that we live in. Oh, your clothing is dirty. You just put it in a box and press a button and it's clean. Oh, and you could have this glass phone that you could have all of Torah on it and listen to incredible Torah podcasts. There are some that you might recommend to him. Oh, and you can make a phone call and call your cousin in Israel. Oh, you want to go to Israel? Oh, no, you have to get on a camel and travel for 6 months and probably die along the way. Just you could arrive there in 12 hours in a climate-controlled metal cylinder. Oh, yeah, there's plenty of food for everyone. Wait, you have more than one piece of bread? What? You can eat a whole loaf? And you can study Torah peacefully without any pogroms? And you can wear your tzitzis and your kippah amongst the Gentiles? And the Jews are back in the land of Israel? It's a wasteland. It's a barren, desolate, empty land. You see the Jews from all over, from Iraq and Persia and Egypt and North Africa and all over Europe, they've all coalesced back into Israel? Are you kidding me? There are yeshivos with thousands of students, a stone's throw away from Temple Mount. People would not believe that we're not living in Messianic times if they were resurrected. We see a world that very much resembles the world that is described in Rambam, in Ramchal, about the Messiah. Even when we think about the nations, the Rambam explained the role of Christianity and Islam. They do the mass market adoption. And that's part of the Messianic process. And that's there to prepare the world for Messiah. So, of course, we know that only began. The nations only adopted monotheism once the final 2,000-year tranche began. But today, we see that there's a realignment. The Christians are becoming less religious. And that is something that we ought to expect. Why? Because Messiah's job is to make those minor last-second, final touch-ups to what they believe. And therefore, when we see a certain softening of the Christians in their religious fervor, that's something that you should expect. And then you see the Muslims making peace with Israel, with the Jews. That's something that again, is not my words. That's what's described in the literature. So this is a long way of saying that if we just take what our sages tell us, Messiah, at least on one level, it's a process that takes thousands of years, 2,000 years, until it's completed. And it's a world of material abundance and stability and peace and the ingathering of exiles, even mass media. The sages have told us the reason why there's mass media, it's all for Messiah. Even the announcement of Messiah. It's going to be on the radio, we were told. It's going to be in the newspapers. Today, it's possible for information to spread the world over in one day, even in 1 second. The idea of the world becoming singularly focused and everyone aware of the same information, it's only possible today. And again, this is not me talking, this is our sages have said that the reason why we have all these things, all these advances in technology, because that is going to facilitate the Messiah. This utopian world, a world that is physically and spiritually refined and perfected, we're not there yet. But we are seeing the contours we're seeing the advanced stages. So many of the prophecies have come true, and we're witnesses to it. The largest settlement of Jews in the world is in Israel. Would you believe it? The land, that same land that's been so talked about in the Torah and such an emphasis of our nation for thousands of years, and it was totally empty. During the exile, the land is gafris v'melech, sulfur and salt, completely desolate. It's desert for 2,000 years. And now, as foretold in the Torah, it blooms again. It's blossoming again. A total anomaly of history. And it's evident to all of us today. And it's part of the Messianic prophecies. And again, the Rambam, when he talks about Messiah almost 1,000 years ago, it's hard for us to imagine, how is it possible that there's no miracles, there's no changes to the rules of nature, there's no changes to the laws of physics, yet all these things are happening, and we're actually living in that world. So that's, I think, a very important observation that I think makes this whole subject much more real and tangible for us. I heard from very reputable and universally respected sages who have said, and I'm not saying this because I don't want to make any predictions, but I've heard it from people, Messiah is around the corner. You can hear the footsteps. You can hear the footsteps. This is something which is much more real, or it should be much more real to us than what maybe we had originally thought. We're close to this utopian world, to this world of universal recognition of God. We have a comprehensive description of what the objective of Messiah is. We understand what it looks like, or at least part of it, the essence of it. The next subject I want to ponder, please God, the next opportunity that we get, is going to be the how. How is all this going to happen? What is the mechanism for this to happen? You know, it seems like you can make an argument, well, yeah, the world's advancing and there is prosperity and there is peace and there is abundance, but spiritually the world is devolving. How can we speculate that we are in fact getting closer? That's the next subject that we have to address. What about Messiah orchestrates these incredible changes? What is the mechanism through which this all happens? What is the cause that leads to the effect, that leads to this wonderful virtuous cycle that Ramchal talked about? How does all this change happen? That is our next subject. I'm looking forward to studying it with all of y'all from the Torch Center in Houston, Texas. As always, my email address is Rabbi Wolbe, spelled W-O-L-B, B as in boy, E, @gmail.com. Send me your comments, your questions, and your feedback. Okay. Who wants to go first? Who wants to go first? Jump in. Craig is writing a question in the chat. What is the purpose of the 7,000 year time period? We have to talk about that in its appropriate place, and that's going to be when we talk about the 13th principle, which is the resurrection. So we'll get to it. It's a great question.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
The question is, it seems like everything that you said is very black and white about what the Messiah is going to do and how he's going to look and what that dynamics are going to be. How is it that it got so convoluted from what people think it is now?
It's hard for me to answer that question because the human's capacity for foolishness and ignorance can never be underestimated. Never underestimate that.
But it seems like it's just basic comprehension.
Listen, we're going through the sources, so I don't know why people would think otherwise. That's why we always try to dispel misconceptions by going to the actual sources. We go to the sources, and that helps us see the subject clearly. So I don't know why people went awry. I assume that it's a combination of ignorance and charlatanism. But we go to the sources. What do the sources say? And we work from there. I see 2 more questions here in the chat. What happens during the 1,000-year death destruction that you mentioned? Are we all going to stay dead and buried? That is a question we have to address in the 13th principle. So you have to stick around. It's a cliffhanger. Paul is asking a very good question. Can you use the Jewish calendar? Can the Jewish calendar be used to count the 6,000 years? About 270 years to year 6,000. Yes and no. Assuming that the Jewish calendar is accurate, then we have 217 years left. But we don't know if this is actually accurate. It may be much less. There are 160 years that are missing from the calendar. One of the great mysteries of Jewish history. It might be actually a lot less than that. If it's a lot less than that, that may change things. But yes, it's not 500 years. That's for sure. It's not 500 years. It's 200 and something years, or maybe a little less. Yeah, which again does bring this all into perspective.
Is it possible it could be more than 217 years, Rabbi?
No, it's not possible.
I have
Is
a
it
question.
possible? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. Mine was about, you said that the Messiah would die and then his son would take over. And did you mention that he would die and his son would take over as well? Or did I mishear that?
Yes. The Rambam says that he will die, meaning this is not a time of life without death. He will die. His son will succeed him. His grandson will succeed him. That's what he tells me.
Oh, sorry. Is that
Go
like a tune almost to like King David? Because you have like David come and then Solomon, and then kind of things deteriorate after Solomon's son.
Interesting. You're saying that maybe the idea he only gives us this, three teams. Maybe. That's a very interesting observation that we have, we like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We have this kind of this triality. We have 1, 2, 3, and maybe that's the difference, or maybe he's just saying that the dynasty will continue. So I'm not sure exactly how to interpret that, but he does say explicitly the Rambam does say that Messiah will die and will be replaced by succeeded by his son and his grandson. Yeah, but very interesting observation. Steve, you had another point that you wanted to share.
Well, I was just going to ask if, because you made reference to the nations, the Gentile nations, and some of them will be destroyed. Yes. And some of them will obviously, I guess, fulfill the righteous, have a place in the world to come, and all of that. But I'm curious, is it possible? Will the Gentile nations that are destroyed, are those the ones that are going to still be attacking the Jewish nation? And 2, will somebody be destroyed if they do not? I guess maybe I'm analogizing this to some degree with the Christian thing of, if you don't accept Jesus as the Messiah, you're going to suffer eternal damnation. Will there be Gentiles that maybe aren't aggressive but don't accept the Jewish God? Are they punished?
Yeah, so he doesn't say in his comment. I read what he wrote. He doesn't address that point, but my instinct tells me is that people have been given the ample opportunity to accept, and if they're going to resist or they're going to fight, they have to actually accept. It means it's not enough for them to be. They cannot be neutral on this subject. They have to accept the Messiah and accept the ideology that he's promoting. So that's what it seems like. We'll talk about this, I think, hopefully in the successive discussions. So we'll get to that.
Rabbi, where did this 160 years come from? I never heard that before or read that before.
Yeah, so if you study the Jewish calendar, it does, there is it's not something that the lay people focus on too much, but the scholars do point that it does seem that there's some inconsistency in our calendar, which may have not taken into account up to 160 or so, 165 maybe. I don't know the exact details, but if you just Google the missing 30 years, I don't know, we just do it right now. Jewish calendar missing years or something like that. You probably could find a lot about it.
Okay, I'll look it up. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, 160. Yeah, so there's a Wikipedia article on it. And yeah, there's a Wikipedia article called Missing Years, Jewish Calendar. So there are some explanations and there are some scholarly works on this. There are some books on this. But that may be pertinent to our discussion if we want to try to figure out what the timeline is.
Says it's refers to the chronological discrepancy between the rabbinic dating. I can't get it to open, but I will later. But thank you for that. I want to look into
Yeah,
it.
it's an interesting subject. We probably won't talk about that because that's very much in the weeds. And
Unfortunately,
we do have a
unfortunately,
curiosity towards this. There's something we're very curious about knowing the timeline. But we're trying to resist that a little bit.
unfortunately, I won't be here no matter which year we choose.
Why? Whoa, slow down. Because if you're Messiah could come today, we believe. We'll talk more about that. Messiah come today, and then the process of perfection, we have till the year 6,000 to finish it. But that's the end game. The end point of perfection has to be year 6,000. That's the latest it could possibly be.
Okay,
But it could happen today. We could start the process already now, or accelerate the process even now.
well, let's hope that.
Yes.
Nice to see you.
That's great to see you.
Have a great next week, and I know you probably don't. I
Yeah,
don't
we'll be
know.
back. We'll be back here next week. I think Sunday. That's my plan. Hopefully, the 2% won't be as cold as it is today. I won't have to be dressed up like a.
No, it's going to get a lot warmer today and tomorrow, and a lot warmer in the
It wasn't
40s.
distracting. Me and my gloves weren't distracting.
No, I wear them too. All right, be well.
Yes, Paul. Paul, you're on mute. I think.
I don't hear anybody.
I don't hear anyone either. What's
Okay.
going on?
Time to go.
I think
There's-
Paul might be frozen over
It
there.
looks like it. Yeah, I feel frozen too.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you now. Yeah.
Okay.
Say something, whoever said that.
No, we don't hear Paul. It's like he dropped off. Some spotty internet. Okay, Sandy. As Paul logs back in, let's hear what you have to say.
Well, very quickly into your first comments about Messiah comes to make it possible to earn the world to come. I immediately thought about what of all the people who have lived and died before Messiah. But you answered that question later on that they are, if I understood you correctly, they are waiting somewhere. They're not actually in Olam Haba, but they're like in a waiting area.
Yes.
Where is that?
They're in the world of the souls. The world of the souls. We call the power of the righteous one, and the worlds of the soul. The world of the souls. Yeah, paradise.
So once they are there, then are they no longer reincarnated? Are they finished and now they're just waiting?
Well, if they're righteous and they don't need to be perfected, then they're just there waiting. Yes, we talked about that a few months ago. But you could go back. I can send you the link if you would like to go back to listen to it and see how we developed that principle. But yes, they're there. They're perfected. So they're just waiting for everyone else to get perfected, so that way they can be part of the transition. And they're in a world which is very reminiscent, very similar to Olam Haba, but it's not quite Olam Haba. That's the way it's defined. The Gan Eden or the world of the souls, paradise. It's a world that's very similar to Olam Haba, but it's not quite Olam Haba.
And I didn't quite understand what you were saying about the 1,000 years. Did you say it was like 1,000 years hibernation or death and destruction? I kind of got lost on that.
Right. So the world as it currently exists is only going to be around for 6,000 years. Then it's going to be a period of 1,000 years before Olam Haba.
Hmm.
And that's equivalent of the world dying and being reborn. Just like an individual dies, it's put on the ground, and they're gonna emerge like a plant, like a tree. So the world's gonna have a similar kind of transition where it's going to be put on ice, hibernated, destroyed, however you want to say it. It's going to be not the way it currently exists, and then it's going to be reborn for Olam Haba in a very different way.
Okay, so I kind of hesitant about bringing up this, but now you kind of opened the door that I feel a little more confident about asking you this. Makes me think of our portion about, well, I guess it was last week's portion. Joseph, the dreams, he came and prepared. He spent the 5 years preparing, so to speak, for the world to come, the 7 years of famine that was coming. So that almost sounds like the 7 years of famine could be this 1,000 years of hibernation, and all the nations were coming during those 7 years of plenty, where everything was lovely and plentiful, that the nations were coming to him. So it just kind of seemed like maybe that was kind of what you're talking about.
Very interesting, especially given, as we shall see, that Joseph does have a lot of messianic undertones. Like we talked about the Messiah ben David, Messiah ben Joseph. We mentioned that briefly, very briefly. But it is clear that the story of Joseph and Judah and Joseph going to prepare the land before the nation comes, it does have messianic undertones. Very, very, very much so. So very interesting way of framing it. Absolutely. Yes. I accept that framing. Again, I didn't see anyone who talks about that as explicitly as you did, but it makes a lot of sense. Now, Paul asked a question in the chat. Do you know people who meet the criteria of Messiah? We're going to spend a lot of time talking about how to identify who's the real Messiah and who's the imposters, because there are a lot of imposters. The simple answer is that to be Messiah, you have to be a king. That's a prerequisite. House of David, we'll see more about this, but from the father's side, from David, from the mother's side, from the tribe of Dan. And you have to do a lot of things. And there are stages where we say someone is likely the Messiah, but we don't know for sure. And then when they build a temple and do all this stuff, they finish it, we know for sure. So to be really, 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 really righteous, of course, that's the basic. And we know a lot of people that are like that. And I have my suspicions, and we will see as well that every generation has a potential Messiah as well, which is, again, another subject. Every generation, there's a potential Messiah. But the criteria for Messiah are very numerous, and we're going to go through them. I have already prepared. If you want to hear, I'll read you just the titles of the ones that of the subjects that I'm working on. Just to
Sure. Love to hear it.
Okay, here we go. Ready? Okay, the one we just did, we call it the objective of Messiah.
Right.
We have one called the Messianic era, one called the Messianic Revolution, then the nature of Messiah, the arrival of Messiah, Messianic prognostications and its perils, Messiah ben Joseph and Messiah ben David, identifying King Messiah, expediting Messiah, birth pains of Messiah, anticipating Messiah, the mechanism of Messiah, and that's so far. We may add more as the subject evolves. But so we have a lot to study. You guys remember I was very excited to talk about this, and we spent a lot of time talking about other things, but now we're here, so we're going to really try to do this as rigorously and comprehensively and fundamentally as possible. So we have a lot to look forward to. Please God, hopefully.
We gotta go. Nice to see you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else wants to chime in before we sign off?
When are you going to release the first lecture on the Messiah?
I want to do it. Maybe today or tonight.
Okay.
So we'll hopefully release that, because I tell you guys, I have a weird policy? I'll tell it to you because we're friends. Yeah, we do our big fundraiser in February, March. So I like to release a whole battery of podcasts during that week. So that way I could kind of make a pitch, but not give everyone a podcast as well, but also make a pitch to get their support. So when it's the end of the year, I start stockpiling, like Joseph, stockpiling some shows. So that way, I always have one in the reserve. So there's always, sufficient material. That way I don't have to prepare, I don't have to release and record the day of or the week of, 6 different shows for all the different shows, 6 different podcasts shows. So I always keep one in reserve. Now I have a backup one for this Torah 101. So I'll release the first one. I only have one in the chamber, Okay, everyone. This was fantastic. I enjoyed it. Next week, it's New Year's, but I hope to be here. Thank you all. Everyone's writing such nice stuff in the chat here. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, David. Thank you, Nancy. I'll see everyone, please God, next week. I hope everyone has a wonderful week. And 2022 was amazing. I enjoyed every single opportunity to study with y'all. And hopefully, please God, we'll do it again in 2023 in good health and in great spirits. Okay, take care, everyone. Best regards.